So just to close out this video here, Alex and I saw a lot of things that I put on our sheet as frivolities.
Yeah.
Frivolities. We also called it CES weirdness on our sheet. It basically comes down to a number of interesting concepts that we saw at CES. Again, products that are made in some cases for attention, in other cases they have very interesting applications or they're very compelling in their own technical terms. But they're the kinds of things that tend to stick out from CES. They're the kinds of things that you'll see in like a Verge headline, for instance,
Yeah.
about CES. These are not the standard, how many dimming zones does my television have? What's the dot pitch on my micro LED? These are not the kinds of questions that are being contemplated by these technologies. These are actually new and interesting and innovative technologies in their own ways that we thought we'd want to reflect on here.
Yeah. Let's start with the first one. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't find this very compelling at all, but it's getting enough headlines and enough, it's weird in its own right. I believe they call it, from Razer, we hinted at it earlier, Project Ava or Alva. I don't know, I actually know the pronunciation. I think it was said multiple ways at the booth, unless I'm mistaken. It's a avatar on a reflective, it almost looks like the canister that the ooze was in TMNT2. And it's got like this avatar that's rendering in 3D on a laptop or any device it's hooked up to. Here they're showing in a Razer laptop, showing this little avatar. It can take any form. They showed me a guy named Zane, a buff, handsome fellow. Really reminded me of a Tim and Eric sketch almost, and then also like a Miku lookalike. Right. Talking to me in a voice, and it can comment on your gameplay by like it's like essentially looking at where your screen is. It's plugged into like some sort of large language model, and it's doing text to speech, and it can listen to you, I believe, if you ask it questions. It can give you any information you ask it about like what the weather is outside. It's just like a strange interface for interactions with something like ChatGPT. And I also don't think the screen looked very good that it was projecting onto, or whatever it was doing. It didn't look very good.
Alex, I think the key problem with this demo is that it didn't really show me anything new, because the problem here is basically you have these fundamental capabilities that we now see in LLMs, right? We have the ability to read visual information off a screen. We have the ability to see information from a webcam. We have the ability to synthesize text, synthesize speech using other models that feed into an LLM. We have the ability to retrieve information in real time from the internet. All these capabilities were shown off in this demo. They're nice capabilities, and if you showed this demo to me in 2019, I would have done anything to take this, because it's like the most incredible thing that I would have ever seen at that time. But obviously, since then, we've had so many developments in machine learning, so many developments in LLMs. Obviously, I don't need to belabor that point too much. Certainly since 2020, 2021, the introduction of GPT-3, the subsequent developments in LLMs, we've obviously seen a lot of these advancements since then. As far as I can tell, this is not really doing anything new in that space. The one new thing this is doing, relative to other systems I've seen, is that it is using a low-quality display. It's using a low-quality display. It really does just look like kind of a pretty mediocre, pretty crappy display, to be honest.
Bad viewing angles.
Yeah, that's basically this display that has poor viewing angles, that is in a kind of glass cylinder, but that isn't really doing anything for it. It's kind of trying to create the impression of some kind of holographic display. Now, holographic displays aren't really possible at the moment. There are different kinds of volumetric displays that people try to implement. One way that people try to implement holographic-like displays is through the use of LEDs and spinning fan blades and things like this that change their color parameters. We saw this at CES. Unfortunately, it does not photograph very well, so it did not show up too well on camera. But yeah, this did not seem very compelling. I also found it interesting that they were using the Grok LLM, which is obviously from Elon Musk's XAI company, from X, formerly known as Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And it actually seems very similar to this technology that he revealed which is this Grok companion, these Grok characters, these like 3D characters that you can talk to, that talk back to you. This actually seems extremely similar to this technology, even though look and appearance of the characters is quite similar. I wonder if they're using similar technology to maybe drive the way they're talking, right? Like I think it's a similar kind of tech stack, and the fact they're using Grok here suggests to me that maybe this is a similar kind of thing. Again, I think this is like kind of derivative of that, or at least it seems like a fairly similar product, except that you're combining it with a low quality, supposedly holographic display. Now, I actually would prefer just a regular bog standard LCD, or really almost any other kind of display here relative to this display. I actually don't think it's a good way to show off this content.
Yeah, I just also failed to see what its purpose is. Like,
Yeah,
I just the entire like I was giggling, I guess, because it's like so stupid.
yeah,
But then after a while, I was like, wait a minute, what is this going to be used for? And then I just kind of like I
yeah.
frown.
It, well, Alex is putting it somewhat diplomatically there, but yeah, there would be some concerns about the usage of this product. But yeah, I think this product probably wasn't really for us. I mean, I think it kind of photographs well in some environments, but when you look at it from the side, you can start to see the whole illusion of it break down. I was not a big fan of that, unfortunately. But what I was a big fan of is something that I was really looking forward to at this CES, and that is robots. Now, unfortunately, at CES, there are a lot of robots that I would call fake robots or uninteresting robots, because they're doing things with robotics that aren't really hard problems in robotics. So what they're doing is basically they'll have this base, this wheeled base, this Roomba base, okay?
Yeah.
This Roomba base lets them wheel around in any number of directions. It isn't anything new. It isn't anything that interesting. And then they'll have this kind of biped top half with the arms that move. Or we did see quadruped robots, and you can see in this video here.
Yeah, they're pretty old these days, though. It's like old
Yeah,
tech.
yeah, quadrupeds have been around since about 2009, 2010. Boston Dynamics was showing off some sophisticated quadrupeds. That's not really a new technology, and obviously because you have 4 points of contact with the ground, it's a lot easier to have a quadruped working in real life. If you're not convinced, ask any baby. What do babies do? They're quadrupeds. They started as quadrupeds. They end up as bipeds. I mean, hopefully, most of them do.
Yeah.
Most of them do. But yeah, they started as quadrupeds, end up as bipeds. That really shows the kind of difficulties involved here. So that was most of what we saw. But then we saw 2 or 3 demos that were really impressive. So the first one here is this fairly simple demo that might not seem crazy impressive at first glance, but then you realize, holy, that is a robot walking around, balancing, proper quadruped, walking around, doing this whole routine, walking backwards, walking forwards, walking side to side, tilting, doing all these actions, again, in a kind of repetitive and maybe not too exciting manner. But this is like, RoboCop, basically in person. It does look quite a bit like RoboCop.
Does look like a RoboCop.
Yeah, that was a cool demo, and I think we're quite impressed by that demo. But then we saw a demo that astounded me, absolutely astounded me. So what we started off with was the robots doing a number of dances that were a little bit more acrobatic, a little bit more engaging, involved more active hip flexion, movement, back and forth movement, on things that are kind of dynamic and unstable movement systems. So you see this kind of flossing dance here. That is actually pretty complex to do. I'm not sure that I could do that in person. The robot was doing
We'll
it
see
though.
it.
Yeah, the robot was doing it though. And then the other interesting element to this demo was that the robots seemed to be kind of quasi-interacting. They were at least moving around and navigating that space without colliding with each other, which I thought was, an achievement of its own. Obviously, they have some kind of computer vision system there. I don't think it's just a man in a suit with a VR headset, as has been the case with some
No.
VR demos from perhaps the progenitor of XAI himself.
Maybe.
Quite possibly. But this was a very interesting demo already, right? That was pretty cool. And then, interestingly enough, one of the robots started to adopt this fighting posture. It started to adopt this fighting posture and putting up its dukes, as it were, and getting ready to fight something. And that was kind of a little bit curious, but then what happened absolutely astounded me. This woman stepped into the ring and started fighting the robot. Wow. So this is absolutely incredible. So what you're seeing here is this woman fighting this robot, colliding with the robot. The robot is stable. It's maintaining its position. She punches the robot The robot punches back. She even kicks the robot. And at one point, she kicks the robot and it falls over. And some helpful bystanders help the robot back up, back on its feet. You can see it pick itself up from a completely lying back position, re-enter the fight. Wow, this is absolutely insane. I've seen a lot of robot demos in my time. I'm very familiar with the state of the art in terms of some of the American robotics companies, in terms of the Optimus robot, that is obviously very popular in terms of some of the Boston Dynamics demos. Obviously, they're a very early leader in this space, but to actually see this dynamic fight between a human and a robot interacting, fighting, punching. I mean, granted, perhaps some of the movements are a little bit stiff, perhaps you can make some critiques, but this is like absolutely next level stuff, and it really astounded me.
Yeah, it was. I just really liked when the robot picked itself up because it's a pretty complex movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I don't see a lot of robot fighting in my life, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, a very cute little demo. I'm very interested in robotics and when it can start doing stuff that are like nuisance in our lives, like manual labor,
Right.
cleaning up clothes in my house or something like that, But this is like one of the steps in that direction. Hopefully we see more of it.
Yeah, yeah. Alex, I noted that you put something on the sheet here that just says hologram AI avatar. I'm not totally sure that I saw that as much as you did. Why
Okay.
don't you describe that?
Okay, so well, like the Ava demo or the Project Ava demo from Razer, we there were actually a couple of other AI avatar demos. Some of them on 2D screens, and I did see at least one of them was on a projected hologram using the spinning fans, like you described earlier. And this leads into my discussion of AI, I would
Right.
say, where, and everyone was talking about it, that just the entire show was, there were some things that weren't using the buzzword, but pretty much every single thing was using the buzzword. And I don't know, some of like how compelling these things are, I'm not certain. A number of
Right.
them weren't very compelling from my view, and there was actually, we were talking about Dell and Alienware earlier, but there was like a little, I believe, blurb from an interview that was with PC Gamer here, and basically Dell not walking back, but just saying like the consumer interest in the AI PC is not like 100% there,
Right.
and they need to start advertising their PCs and specifically laptops among other categories, not just like, oh, it can do AI ML tasks or whatever, but people care about screens, brightness, battery life, power and performance.
Right.
And honestly, those were the things that interested me most. Other than, I guess the robots were interesting, but like, yeah, I was like more interested in traditional computing than I was in a lot of the AI stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Alex that like there is some definite AI fatigue in the market. Now, I obviously have had a bit of a long-standing interest in LMs, at least since GPT-2, and certainly with GPT-3, I really felt like things were kicking off, and obviously those are hilariously primitive relative to what we have now. But I think it's really, the question to me is really, what does the physical embodiment and what does the consumer product associated with AI look like, right? Does it look like a wearable? Does it look like a headset? Does it look like a car? Does it look like a robot? What does it look like in the near term future at least? Because with these AI models, the distribution is as easy as anything else on the internet. Even perhaps easier because to use ChatGPT, I don't have to download the ChatGPT model in the same way that like to play a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, I'd have to download the game. It's just something that's easily accessible via the internet. It's something that's easily spreadable, easily shareable, show it to your friends. There's no kind of impairment there. And it's not necessarily clear to me that there's like a better AI product, like shoving it into a laptop would necessarily be better than honestly just having something on your phone. I mean, the phone already has video input, has audio input, you're always carrying it with you. Like that almost seems like the perfect AI device. Doesn't it really seem like you need a specialty AI device to me?
Yeah, there's also like AI home demos that we just totally skipped over. There was like
Yeah.
AI fridge demo. Like I'm not even AI lawnmower, AI tractor,
Don't forget AI coffee recommendations.
AI coffee recommendation, which I have no idea what that's about. Yeah, so it was like being used for a lot of stuff where it's like added to an appliance.
Right.
And honestly, with a lot of appliances, I really care about this is kind of goes back to the Dell statement. I care about longevity, reliability, and ease of repair. And all these things actually seem like they'd get in the way of those kind of things. Like when it's attached to like a dedicated appliance, and I'm like, I'm not interested. And your argument here about like it makes more sense when it's attached to like something that's easily transportable and universal. That seems much more like realistic to me.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. But looking away from perhaps the future of technology and looking back at its past, in some cases its distant past, Alex wanted to highlight two prominent brands that have seemingly reemerged from the dead, or at least from relative stasis here. And that's RCA and Radio Shack. So Alex, why are we talking about RCA and Radio Shack in the year of our Lord 2026?
I have no idea why we're talking about them, but we're just like walking around. And there's a lot of really extraneous booths here from brands that you don't necessarily expect, but really Radio Shack for me and RCA, they represent like a pretty, it's interesting what they did in the past, but here there was like, I think the RCA booth had like a number of CRT televisions at it, and then the rest of it was like nothing. I think there was like a speaker or a boombox somewhere, and there was like nothing else.
I think they had some kind of charity going on.
There was a charity event, which I guess is nice. There's two dogs.
Yeah.
But it was just really funny to see them like right next to like at the same place as like AI robots punching each other or whatever. And then same thing with Radio Shack, where I swear Radio Shack went under at one point. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but just like legacy brands coming out, and I actually wonder why they got show floor space. But same thing. There was like Kodak there too. Like really legacy stuff where they're there, but they don't actually have a big impact on the modern markets. There was also a lot of other things that I tried out that I'm not really convinced on. I did try out AR glasses from, what is the name of the company? X-Real?
X-Real, I believe, yeah.
X-Real. It was, once again, kind of an avatar demo, just like the Project Ava, where I put on the glasses. You can't see this, unfortunately, right now, because it's an AR demo, but I put on some glasses and a very anime waifu.
Let's say a voluptuous figure.
Yeah, it's like, I really wish it wasn't that way, but an anime waifu was talking to me about the weather around me, and it was projected into a 3D space, stereoscopic vision.
Sure.
But
I'm familiar. I have stereoscopic vision myself.
Like you could like see your hands projected into it with a bit of lag. But what would it bring me? It was just like especially the avatar, because it had to like run using Unity, and you're like taking up all this like space running a 3D avatar.
Was it using Unity?
It was using Unity.
Oh,
yeah, it was using Unity. I saw it load up.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking like, man, I'm rendering this 3D avatar in my vision, takes up a huge portion of my vision. Like I thought it was so dumb. But I could imagine AR being useful in other contexts, but not for just like an avatar that's talking to me about like the weather and like how I get from point A to point B. Like I'd use my phone for that.
Also, I think there is a bit of a conflict here that's been brewing between the kind of pass-through AR glasses mentality and then something like the Vision Pro, right? The Apple Vision Pro, which uses pass-through cameras and has a much better field of view, right? Where you're really immersed in the content in that kind of VR headset.
It was pretty small. I think I could even see the projection of it, like how far it went out. It was pretty low FOV.
So I'm not really sure how you resolve that between the lightweight but not very capable kind of headset option and the thing that is basically the inverse of that, and obviously colossally expensive in the Vision Pro. I don't think either is ideal, but I almost think you kind of need both to really sell it to consumers as a mainstream everyday item, at least as something that you're going to actually use every day, and not just like a frivolity like a Quest 3 might be for the typical consumer, right? But something that was kind of a frivolity, but a very pleasant frivolity, was something that we actually saw at Intel. So Alex, why don't you walk us through what might be the most interesting Lego sculpture I've ever witnessed in my life?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cool Lego in my life, like going to like Lego World, I think it's called, in Berlin. That's pretty cool. But this was made by engineers at Intel, where the Panther Lake SoC was brought out in something like, I swear it was like 42,000 separate Lego bricks.
Yeah.
And it was organized in such a way to be a really well-made representation of the SoC with each discrete block and its physical space blocked out with the exact same scale dimensions as the actual SoC itself. Right. And, you know, it had like the pins on the back in the same mount and configuration as you would see on the real thing. You can see me holding it up here.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it also had LEDs built into it that were plugged into a laptop running on it nearby, plugged into Task Manager. So for things like CPU and GPU, as well as, what else was maybe there? Oh yeah, CPU and GPU definitely, showing how much utilization was currently on the laptop by how much the LEDs were being lit up. And for the NPU, which Windows currently does not allow you to see its current utilization in the Task Manager, the engineers wrote a machine learning program to read the task manager and then spit that out and drive the LEDs with it, because they didn't actually have an API to plug that into. And that's was showing the amount of NPU usage. And they were driving the GPU at that moment to get it to such a high GPU utilization by showing the Lego brick program, the planning program of like a 3D model of the thing. It was so layered and complex.
It was lagging a bit.
Yeah. It was like it was just like, this is like one of the craziest. This reminds me of like a lot when we saw Minecraft RTX the first time too. We saw like a really crazy demo of it running with like on like, I don't know, like a DJ pult. You know, it's like we saw like, you know, people. I love it when engineers do stuff with hardware and they plug it into software and they make it do crazy stuff. And this was like a passion project by a number of engineers. One of them who talked to us about it. It was just, you know, just crazy engineer stuff.
Yeah, the kind of stuff they're putting together here for what is ultimately just like kind of something in the corner of Intel's presentation here.
Yeah.
It's pretty extraordinary the amount of effort that actually goes into some of these CES presentations. And that's something that I feel like we sometimes ignore, is the immense amount of time and effort that goes into presenting what is basically like a little spectacle for the press.
Yeah, and who knows how many people actually even noticed
care
it
or
and even cared to notice it. But, you know, he was lucky that he caught someone that thinks Lego's kind of fun.
Yeah, and they were genuine Lego bricks, by the way. They were stamped with the Lego symbol.
Yeah, and they were actually all orientated in the proper direction. They weren't like mixed in a way, so like everything was horizontal. That should be. It was very funny.
Yeah.
You know, the details were immense. But we also saw some pretty interesting desks.
Yeah, I would say we saw some people who were locked in perhaps some different ways. So I just took notice of a few people who were in interesting kind of configurations here, interesting kind of physical configurations with respect to their virtual workspaces, with respect to their gaming setups. It's all very interesting here. We also saw a woman partaking in a massage chair. There were all kinds of very cyberpunk-esque massage chairs.
Okay, we didn't get, I don't know if we got footage of this, but there were massage chairs that looked like the bikes in like Akira or like Cyberpunk. I have no idea what the design was on that. This thing was hideous. I can't imagine putting it in your home. But yeah, and I'm pretty sure they were talking about how it was an AI-driven massage chair. I'm not mistaken.
Would you really want a massage chair that wasn't AI-driven, Alex?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, they had massage chairs for decades and decades without AI, so one can only imagine how much better they are now.
Oh, they got to be so good, yeah, especially when they look like some cyberpunk garbo.
Yeah, but I particularly took notice of this very locked-in kind of salaryman figure here who was engaged in a kind of recumbent desk setup. Engaged what looks like some kind of
was it a CAD program or
software or something. I'm not exactly sure what the real world application of that is, but I think this is a very interesting and possibly maybe comfortable but not practical desk setup.
Depending upon how it could be angled or pushed towards you, it was maybe not close enough to actually appreciate what you're looking at without squinting or something. Yeah. I mean, it's cool to see like semi-experimental design and people looking at ergonomics in a new way, and that should probably always be done to increase comfort. But this one, beyond the novelty, I can't imagine buying it.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly imagine buying it, but I would imagine also immediately regretting it. To be
Yeah.
honest with you. To be honest with you. One last thing I wanted to touch on before Alex and I reflect on our trip more generally here, reflect on Vegas more generally, is a very cool hall, which was the South Hall at CES. Now, the other halls are perhaps more high-flying halls, more full of exciting products, more full of the kinds of products that would typically attract tech journalists like a moth to a flame, the kind of high-flying combat robotics demos that really do impress people. But I thought there were some interesting things in the South Hall that I wanted to point out here. So first of all, there were a lot of accessories. So J-Sox was there. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but they're a very interesting Switch 2 brand. They had some interesting Switch 2 products, which I've seen before and actually availed myself of a couple of them because I really do love my Switch 2 grips and cases. Right. They also had a mock-up of a Steam machine, which is the only kind of mention or use of the Steam machine we saw at the show.
That was literally it. I mean, we talked to people about it because we're interested in it, and everyone was just like,
everyone's talking about it.
Yeah,
I actually saw a Valve engineer at the show just walking past me. That I also met her at the Valve event I attended back in October of last year. But I did not actually see any physical Steam machines except for this mock-up with some kind of a vinyl decal on the front, perhaps, or some kind of. I suppose in this case the faceplates are kind of replaceable, so maybe it's one of those.
Yeah, right.
But that is basically just a just a kind of minor frivolity there. But we also saw a very interesting thing, which is they have these pavilions. I believe there was a Korean pavilion and a China pavilion, and they're
In Thailand too.
and Thailand pavilion, and they were mainly Taiwan.
everything.
They were mainly marketed towards, I think, kind of business to business or ODM kinds of sales. So you walk through and there are people promoting heat sinks. There are all kinds of companies that don't exactly have names that roll off the tongue or are suited for Western audiences, like Guangzhou Baiyu Electronic Co. Limited. Very interesting places. But this is actually, I think, a place where a lot of other businesses are going, a lot of the other vendors are going. Perhaps the Razors of the world at some point are going to these vendors and are saying, hey, we want to build this product. What can you give me for this component? Or even what can you do for me if I wanted a design for a custom, semi-custom component? So this is actually a pretty interesting view into the world, perhaps which is underappreciated, which is actually the world of these kind of unsung heroes that are actually working in places like Shenzhen to actually deliver these products to the end consumer.
Yeah, it was also interesting because we're journalists walking through it, and they're still trying to talk to us because they don't know that, and they're like trying to talk to us, trying to sell us their like little adapter for a battery or something, or like some sort of power tool configuration, or we even saw stuff like non-standard electronic toothbrushes, and it was just like it's just like totally crazy stuff that we have no bearing of interest in, but they all want to sell it to us. And it was a little lonely back there too. There weren't that many people.
It was lonely, and that South Hall was absolutely massive. I have some footage of it here. You can see me panning from one end of the South Hall to the other end of the South Hall, and it is, I mean, it's insane. It's got to be like 1 or 2 kilometers.
Yeah, it was more than a kilometer across.
More than a kilometer across.
Pretty big.
Yeah. I mean, after Alex and I were walking around the CES show floor for a few hours, it was very tiring, and certainly by the end of that South Hall trek, I was pretty tuckered out.
At least it wasn't too loud.
At least it wasn't too loud. The South Hall was a little bit quieter. Again, that kind of business to business focus. There are fewer business customers than there are consumers in this world, so it was a little bit quieter, a little bit more sedate here.